3, 2, 1. It says we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's Tuesday, Facebook Live, 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 o'clock Eastern, 1 a.m. in Italy, 9:30 a.m. Wednesday morning in Australia, and we're live. And I have my very good friend, Dr. Terry Wahls, here with us today. Dr. Wahls, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, of course. It's always a pleasure when you and I have a chance to hang out together.
Absolutely.
So before we get started, I just want to say to everyone, I want to make sure that you're taking care of yourselves right now. For those who will be viewing this in the weeks to come, we're in the middle of the pandemic crisis right now. And I heard something today that really distresses me. It's all quite distressing, but this one really distressed me over and above. And that is our farmers are having to destroy their crops because all the restaurants are closed and no one's buying the food. Yeah. So I don't have a sense, and they don't have insurance for this. I don't have a sense of what to do about it, but any of you who are watching, who have access to, if you know some of your local organic farmers, just reach out to them and say, are you guys okay? Are you having a hard time selling your produce? Is there some way that I can buy some produce from you, then give it to your kids, give it to your neighbors? But let's see if we can help each other here, especially our small farmers out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's don't know what to do to help those folks. So maybe if we all put our heads together, we'll come up with something.
Well, Tom, I've been talking to my tribe about my great-grandmother's compendium of cookery and modern book of knowledge from 1890, and how they stored food without the benefits of refrigeration or electricity, using root cellars and fermentation. And so I've been demonstrating how to ferment sauerkrauts and kimchis, garlic, so that we could maintain our vegetables, our produce, and by using lactobacillus, you drop the pH, so these things will be much safer for you to consume as well.
Marvelous. And are you doing those on video, so they're on your website?
Yeah, I've been doing them on Instagram, and so your tribe should follow me on Instagram so they could watch, because we do very short little 1-minute videos, because everyone, we're all pressed for time, and so I have very short messages about eating and putting your food up, and none of it it doesn't necessarily require electricity.
And what is the Instagram account that they would look for?
Dr. Terry Wahls, D-R-T-E-R-R-Y, Wahls, W-A-H-L-S.
All right, everyone, include that in your Instagram favorites and pick up on some of this information. Great concepts. Now, for some of you, there may be a few people out there who do not know who you are, Terry. I don't think there are many, but there may be a few of my tribe that don't know. So could you give us a little of your background, specialty, and your health history to bring them up to speed?
So I'm an internal medicine doc here at the University of Iowa. And so I'm a very academic person, and was very skeptical of special diets, supplements, functional medicine. But God has a mysterious way of teaching us. In 2000, I developed weakness of my left leg and was evaluated, diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And again, being a professor of medicine, I knew I wanted to treat my disease very aggressively. So I sought out the best MS center in the country, saw their best people, took the newest drugs, because that's what I believed in. And I went steadily downhill. 2 years into this, my neurology docs told me about the work of Lauren Cordain. I read his papers, his books, and after a lot of prayer and meditation, I went back to eating meat because I'd been a vegetarian, low-fat vegetarian for about 20 years. I continued to decline. The next year, I'm taking mitoxantrone. I continue to decline. The next year, I'm taking Tysabri and more of these new experimental biologic drugs. But I continue to relentlessly decline. I start reading the basic science. I decide that mitochondria are the driver of disability for MS. and I create a supplement cocktail for my mitochondria, and that slows the speed of my decline. I'm very, very grateful, but I am still declining. By 2007, I'm so weak I cannot sit up in a regular chair. I'm having trouble with brain fog. I've had 27 years of trigeminal neuralgia. Well, so abnormal sensation, electrical pain across my face, usually on the right, occasionally on the left. That's been getting more severe, more difficult to turn off. And so I'm coming to terms with the fact that it looks like despite the best care from the best people in the country taking the newest drugs, I'm on track to become bedridden by my illness, demented by my illness, and quite possibly having to live with intractable neuralgia, intractable face pain, so that sound, light, touch, the breeze across my face would trigger electrical pain. And it was that summer that I discovered the Institute for Functional Medicine. I took their course on neuroprotection. I really loved it because they talked so much about mitochondria. I had more supplements, I added them. Not a lot happened. Maybe things were slightly better. And then I had this really big aha moment. And that was like, what if I redesign my paleo diet based on what I learned from the basic science, from ancestral health and functional medicine, and all those supplements I was taking? What if I did research to figure out where they were in the food supply, still following the paleo diet rules? So that's several more months of research. But December 26th, 2007, I start this new way of eating. And within 3 months, my pain is gone, my fatigue is gone, I'm able to sit up, I'm beginning to walk with walking sticks. Within 6 months, I get on my bike for the first time in 6 years, and I pedal around the block. My son is crying, my daughter's crying, my wife is crying, I'm crying. And then in another 6 months, my wife sees a courage ride and signs us up for it. And together we bike 18.5 miles. So this radically changes how I think about disease and health, and it will radically change the way I practice medicine. And it ultimately changes the type of research that I do. And that's now what I research is diet and lifestyle to treat multiple sclerosis related symptoms.
That's just marvelous. And I've seen the pictures of you when you were in your reclining wheelchair, unable to walk. And a year later, you're on your bicycle.
You did pretty good, yeah.
Yes, you did pretty good. High five to you on that one. Huh?
All right.
Yes. And Dr. Wahls is a personal friend and a mentor and a colleague. We have been kind of high-fiving each other in symposiums.
Many years now, yeah.
For many years. And I would encourage everyone first to pick up on her book, which we're going to talk about a little bit, and look into her approach, because for some people, it is the missing link. If you've gotten to a certain point in your health and it's kind of frozen there, let's listen to Dr. Wahls and what she has to say. And if it makes sense to you, which it will, then you might apply some of these principles. So let's talk a little about your book, Terry. And
I'll show it off.
There you go. Yeah.
My baby.
Yes. And what might be a summary of the book?
I'm talking about the science that's come along to make it clear that the reason we develop multiple sclerosis or rheumatoid arthritis or systemic lupus or, frankly, type 2 diabetes or mental health issues is this very complicated interaction between the genes that increase your risk a little bit and a lifetime of food choices, physical activity levels, smoking status, toxin exposures, your vitamin D balance, your other hormonal balance, and your social networks. So while I can't change the DNA I got from my parents, I probably can change whether the genes are turned on or off, and I can change all these other environmental factors. So in my book, I go through the science behind how these factors work. And then I give you very specific suggestions and guidance on how you can address your diet, how we can address toxin exposure, stress reduction. And in my new version of the book, I put more tools for people to personalize the diet. So we have sort of a pre-Wahls version, and then a Wahls level 1, Wahls level 2, which is a paleo diet, a ketogenic version of the diet, and then many different ways that you can be in ketosis. We talk about histamines, oxalates, FODMAPs. I talk about hormesis. We talk about neuro rehab. We talk about the science of behavior change. Because what you and I know is we can evaluate someone, give them a very nice timeline to help them understand the environmental factors contributing to their health, prescribe a diet and lifestyle. But it's very, very hard for people to abandon our disease-promoting habits and lifestyles and embrace this new health-promoting diet and lifestyle.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about the process of behavior change, why we're addicted to these destructive behaviors. And then I give people many more tools to increase your chance of success.
Critically important to develop a paradigm shift, because, you know, the reality is, if my body's not functioning the way I want it to, something about the way I'm living my life has contributed substantially to that. And,
absolutely.
And if we don't change that aspect of life, you can't expect different results if you're doing the same thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So how do we transition into a new paradigm of living life? And that may be sleep patterns, that may be food selections, it may be toxic emotional relationships. There are so many things to look at.
There are many things for us to consider.
Yeah.
And the first thing that I talk about is we have to create desire. So we have to be inspired either by seeing someone else's story or other similar cases. So I can see that there's a possibility that healing journey might be relevant for me. And then we need to understand the mechanisms of why those diet and lifestyle interventions are powerful. So I talk about using metaphors that relate to the person. So I'm a farm kid, so I can talk about all sorts of farming metaphors and gardening metaphors. I'm also an athlete, so I can talk about athletic metaphors. And on the farm, we had to repair our equipment, so I can do mechanical metaphors as well. So we have to understand the science enough, but I have to have a concrete metaphor that I can really latch on to.
Yeah.
And then the next thing we talk about is, what is your why? Because it is very uncomfortable to give up sugar, to give up processed foods, to give up gluten, to give up dairy, because most of us are addicted to those compounds. So you're going to go through perhaps some headaches, some body aches, some feeling withdrawal, craving-like symptoms. So then I ask people to reflect on what really matters to you. What is your purpose? Is there someone or something that you care so deeply about that if they were in a house that was on fire, you would run into that house to save that person or to save that item because it's so precious to you? And for many of us who have children or grandchildren, I know obviously if one of my kids or grandkids should ever be so fortunate as to have them, but if one of my children were in a burning building, I would run in to go get them. I would save them without thinking.
Yes.
If they don't have anything that they care that passionately about, I'm going to send them off to talk therapy because we have some deeper issues to help them find joy and purpose and meaning in their life. If they have something they care deeply about, then the next step is helping them identify what they want the health for, what is the next actionable step, and linking it to that person or that mission that they care deeply about.
May I pause you there?
Yes.
I've not heard that before, Terry, and that for everyone, that is a critical component of being successful at a paradigm change, is
Yes.
what is it that fires you up? What is it
Absolutely.
that is so important to you about life? And for many of us, I would venture to say, what, Dr. Wahls, in your experience, as you introduce this concept in your seminars or one-on-one with patients, what's the percentage of people that find that this is the roadblock that they have to address?
Essentially all of them.
Yeah.
We have to have skin in the game, and we have to care so deeply about this that I'm willing to put up with some discomfort.
Yeah.
Because if I'm not ready to put up with discomfort to do the work, there'll be no success changing diet and lifestyle. You might get them to take a medication for a short time period that has minimal side effects. But to do the work of creating new habits, extinguishing troublesome, problematic habits, that's work.
Yeah.
And for people to be willing to do the work, I have to feel very passionately, deeply connected to my why. So I'll put in the time. And so I've learned to explore this concept very early on to know, are they ready to do the work? And if they aren't, I'm like, this is not the right time for you. I can send you off to talk therapy. It seems like you don't have as much joy in your life as I would like you to experience. So I encourage them to go down a talk therapy route so they can have more joy, more meaning. And then I let them know when you're ready and you want to tackle this again, just ask for another referral back and we'll see you. I'm not at all into arguing with patients. This is either the right time, and this matters so much that they want to be able to see their son graduate from high school, attend their daughter's wedding, attend their spouse's graduation from their PhD program, something that resonates deeply with them. Then we can work with them. Then we can do anything together. But if there's not anything that they care deeply about, this is not the right time. It's not the right intervention. I'm not the right practitioner to help them.
That's really, I guess I would say you walk with a lot of integrity, that you're telling people, save your money. It's not the right time, that this is a prerequisite. You've got to have skin in the game.
And it may really not be the right time because their spouse is struggling with a parent who's dying with pancreatic cancer, or their spouse, is going through chemotherapy for breast cancer or prostate cancer. So they don't have any discretionary time to give to this project. It's not that that's a bad person,
Right?
It's not the right time.
Right. And it's not going anywhere. Your books are everlasting, and
Correct.
your availability right now is everlasting.
Right. So we have to make sure everything is aligned to do the work. And it's actually, for many of my patients, it's incredibly liberating. I say, okay, that's fine. This is not the right time. Go take care of your business. And if you decide that you do want to tackle diet and lifestyle to address your health issues, come on back.
Yeah.
And I would be happy to help you.
There are many comments and questions that have already come in. Jane says, Dr. Wahls, thank you for your book that started my journey into a healthy diet into following functional medicine practices. Cindy says, Dr. Wahls, did you have a CT brain scan and were white plaques found?
Oh, yeah. So I've had many MRIs. I think I've even had CAT scans before they had MRI. So that was a long time ago. I do have lesions in my head. I have lesions in my spinal cord. And when I had my dramatic recovery, my neurologist was so thrilled to order the MRIs. And then he was so disappointed when they hadn't changed. And then he sat down and said, I guess that was sort of naive because you've had a stable MRI for years. So it had already been 7 years. So of course you're going to have a stable MRI. Now, what is remarkable is that stable MRI that I had really hadn't changed much since 2004, has continued to not change much It's now 2020. My brain volume hasn't, many with progressive MS have rapid brain volume loss. Cognitive decline is a very big issue. There is steady decline in motor function. And of course, in the first 27 years of my trigeminal neuralgia, the first 7 years of my MS, I had rapid worsening of disability, although my MRI was fairly stable. And I've had remarkably stable MRI since then with stable brain volumes. The neurologist would, they would be calling that a home run. And if I were taking any disease modifying drugs, they of course would attribute it to the drugs. Now, fortunately, when I had my remarkable recovery in 2008, I talked to my neurologist and told him I wanted to get off the drugs. And he said, yeah, that's fine. So he tapered me off the drugs, and I've been on 0 disease modifying drugs since March of 2008.
Marvelous. Sarah asks, love your book, Dr. Wahls. I know some of your recipes have tomato in it. I was told not to eat nightshades because they cause inflammation. Thoughts?
Yeah, oh yeah. So in my book, I have a variety of levels of the diet. So the first level is really a introductory level for people who are just beginning to clean up their diet. Gluten-free, dairy-free, egg-free, lots of vegetables. And I have a plan for the meat eaters and the vegetarians. The next level, I move people to a more paleo diet. We had organ meat, seaweed, fermented foods. And then we have a ketogenic version of the diet. But I also have, what she's talking about is a low lectin version, which is free of nightshades, free of tomatoes, potatoes, eggplants, peppers. I eliminate the seed spices. And if you're having nuts and seeds, I have you soak them overnight. And some people, yes, will need that, but not many. I'd say in my practice, only about 20% end up needing the low lectin version of the diet. We put them on that for ideally 6 months, but sometimes as short as 3. And then we begin to reintroduce these foods to figure out which of those foods is a problem. So tomatoes might be a problem. And if you have rheumatoid arthritis or systemic lupus, the nightshades are more likely to be a problem.
Catherine asks, Dr. Wahls, can one have MS and not have it show up on a brain MRI? I have symptoms that my various doctors say are consistent with MS, yet the brain MRI doesn't show lesions. Appreciate your thoughts. I'm following your diet, except can't stomach organ meat. Looking into the supplement version instead. Thanks for all you.
If you don't like organ meat, we do have organ meat capsules. And do try the recipes that we have. Baked liver can be incredibly delicious. It is possible to have certainly optic neuritis, which is a precursor for MS. And many people with optic neuritis will have other neurologic symptoms. And if you did a spinal tap, you might meet diagnostic criteria based on the spinal fluid. And you may have lesions in the spinal cord and not the brain. Or if you have just one lesion in the brain, a lot of neuroimmunologists are hesitant to call someone having an abnormal MRI with only one lesion in the brain. So it depends on the clinical circumstance. I would also, draw your attention to the fact, I talk about this in my book, that it's the disease process. It's the autoimmune process. It is the toxin load. It is your hormone balance. That's what we're trying to fix. So I care much less about, do you have MS? Do you have a neuroinflammation associated with rheumatoid arthritis? Do you have neuroinflammation associated with inflammatory bowel disease? I want to understand your disease processes and what organs are involved right now. Where are your major symptoms? Are they gut? Are they joint? Are they muscles? Are they skin? And then help you address all these environmental factors and see how improved your physiology becomes. And you may be quite surprised that when you go back to see your doc, he or she will scratch their head and say, well, I thought you were on the verge of being diagnosed with, and I'm going to insert the name. And they'll say, but your antibody tests are negative. all of your exams are looking pretty good. And, you know, these things don't usually reverse. So I must have been making a mistake before.
Right.
You know, and I've seen that with even macular degeneration. We've had people who had, you know, serious retinal problems with early macular degeneration. They go see their eye doctor, and the eye doctor comes back and says, huh, I must not have documented properly because your eyes look much, much better. So the earlier we get you in the disease process, the easier it is for your body to repair and get an improved cellular function and improved laboratory testing, and sometimes resolution of imaging findings.
You know, you talk about environment and optic neuritis as an example. We know that if someone has elevated antibodies to aquaporin 4, that may trigger the inflammation that can cause those types of symptoms. And because of cross-reactivity, antibodies to those nerve components, the aquaporin 4, if you have antibodies to tomato, soy, spinach, or corn, you can have a cross-reactivity and make antibodies to aquaporin 4 and have those neurological symptoms because in your environment, you have a sensitivity to corn or to spinach, but it doesn't make you sick in the stomach. You don't get gut complaints because we all think if we eat a food and we feel fine after we eat the food's good for us.
Yeah,
No,
we're more subtle than all of that. We're much more subtle. And is part of our sensitivity a reflection of our environment, having moved so far away from what our ancestors ate, lived, and did? You know, I expect that's probably true. We certainly have shifted our microbiome. We've shifted our hormonal balance. We've shifted our social networks. And if I can get people to a more of an ancestral lifestyle pattern, paying attention to the diurnal day-night cycle, walking outside, being barefoot outside, swimming, having some meaningful social contacts, their physiology often improves.
Yes.
And sometimes we need to do a lot more. Sometimes you have to do a much more thorough functional medicine investigation, including more sophisticated antibody tests and more sophisticated nutrient tests and food sensitivity tests. But, you know, I'm convinced that my great-grandmothers and your great-grandmothers and great-grandfathers all had a much, much lower rate of autoimmunity. We have pretty much the same genes, but we radically changed our environment.
Yeah.
We changed what we're eating. We eat a lot of processed foods. We have emulsifiers that allow our intestinal lining to be disrupted. And so we have more proteins getting into our bloodstream before they completely digested. That's a huge problem. And we have the environment with the indoor pollution. We have the environment with the increased electromagnetic radiation and other forms of radiation that we're exposed to. So we have many, many, many more challenges than our great-grandparents had.
You know, you have such an eloquent way of explaining what really are simple principles that are foreign to people. You've got such a great way of doing it. That's why you're in episode 1 of Betrayal.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, it was great. And for those of you that haven't had a chance to see Betrayal, we'll put the link here. We interviewed 85 leaders, including Dr. Wahls, on where autoimmunity comes from. And over 600,000 people now have seen it. And it's free. It's at theDr.com/betrayal. So check it out. You'll hear Dr. Wahls talking about antibodies and why antibodies are normal for us unless they get elevated and you get too many antibodies. And then the question of where does that come from?
And then what do we do about it?
And what do we do about it? Exactly right.
Yeah, you know, there's so many people talking about immunity, thinking that immunity and immune function is a problem. I have to spend a lot of time reminding people that we need our immune cells to repair and maintain our bodies. You know, if I get a burn or trauma or laceration, my immune cells will come in and fix me up. My immune cells will protect me and they will look at all my cells and say, well, it looks like maybe there's a viral infection here or a bacterial infection. And then they'll come kill that cell so it can't spread the disease. So right now, as we're all dealing with this pandemic, it's so important that we think about our immune cells and realize that they are absolutely our friends to maintain us, keep us young and healthy and prepared, and to recognize appropriately, do I have some of these viruses in my cells? And if present, kill them off.
Yeah. We have a question from Cindy. I had a CT scan 25 years ago and multiple white plaques were found on my brain. I never followed up for actual diagnosis, but have gained many health issues over the years. I'm getting sicker and wondering if it is MS and want to know what to do to get my health back to a more normal level. Your book sounds like it could answer so many questions.
Yes, go pick this up. It'll be very, very helpful.
Right, agreed.
You know, and it might be MS, but there are many types of neuroimmune conditions.
Yeah.
So there are other serious autoimmune conditions that will also influence your brain. Depending on your level of disability and function, you may, yes, benefit from seeing a neurologist or a autoimmune specialist, and they can give you the conventional guidance. But I would also urge you to see someone with a functional medicine perspective. And in my book, I teach you how to work with your primary care doc. So if you're in a community where there are no Dr. Toms or Dr. Wahls, then work with your primary care doc and this book, because I give you guidance on how to steadily improve your diet, steadily improve your self-cares, and what labs that you're with, very basic primary care things that I could order in my VA healthcare system to monitor progress. Because even if you're a specialist who, let's say they're a rheumatologist or a dermatologist or a neurologist, if they don't believe in a functional medicine, integrated medicine stuff, they think it's all a bunch of hooey, and they want to put you on a disease-modifying drug because you have such severe symptoms, work with your primary care doc. If you can't find a primary care doc fired up about vegetables, fire them and look for someone else. Mm-hmm. If you can't find a primary care doc fired up about meditation, fire them, look for someone else. If you can't find someone in primary care who would be excited about sending you to physical therapy to be sure that you're have a nice and safe home exercise program, fire them. Your primary care doc can help you implement the Wahls protocol. Your specialist, and I will say more and more specialists are fired up about the Wahls protocol. And even now with the COVID, I'm getting people reaching out to me from all over the globe telling me that they're having a lot more hesitation to recommend disease-modifying therapy in the newly diagnosed MS patient. In general, they're wanting people to embrace a diet and lifestyle program, have very close follow-up, and then decide what to do. And the good news is patients are much more interested in, like, maybe I should try diet and lifestyle first, because taking these drugs, when one of the top side effects is increased risk of serious life-threatening infections. Mm-hmm. And we're all watching the pandemic news, so we're all being very mindful.
John has a question. I'd love your thoughts on neurofeedback to reduce brain inflammation.
Mm-hmm. So neurofeedback is a wonderful device. You can wear a cap and sometimes to get your brainwave assessed, and then they'll give a recommended program, and you put some electrodes on your cap, on your skull, and get this feedback, and you get better at it. It's like wearing a biofeedback to monitor your heart rate, monitor your skin temperature. It's just another tool. If you're into tools, it's very effective. If, on the other hand, you want to simply meditate every day, that is also very effective. So it depends on the individual. I have many patients that are very curious and like gadgets and really like to get these latest neurofeedback type of tools, and they're very helpful. I have other patients who are faithful meditators who also have very positive experiences. And we know with an MRI, you can get very favorable brain changes with neurofeedback, and you can get very favorable brain changes with regular meditation.
Dawn says, quinoa is in your recipe book. Isn't quinoa a grain?
Quinoa is a pseudo grain, and I do have grains in my recipe book. So I want to remind everyone that I'm mindful that some people are spiritually committed to being vegan or vegetarian. And so I provide guidance for them to create their diet that is as healthful and as health promoting as I can. And I provide guidance on how to do that safely and optimally. I also will discuss that for some people, grains, even pseudo grains, including quinoa or legumes, may be part of the problem. And it may be that they would do well to follow the elimination diet. But I explain all of that. I give the rationale, and I will let the person, and I do that in my practice. Here's why I want you to follow the elimination diet. And it's either ready or they're not. And I'm like, okay, we'll start with what you're willing to do and follow you along.
Kat says, doing a 3-month elimination diet with mainly veggies is really difficult. I'm vegan and love veggies, but the idea of doing only veggies for that long is something I've been putting off, but know I have to do. Plus, I have food sensitivities, so that cuts my food down even further. I'm sure I have candida.
So this certainly sounds like someone who's going to benefit a great deal from working collaboratively with someone like yourself, Tom, who could do perhaps more specific food sensitivity testing and work with them. Because again, I'm mindful that if someone is spiritually committed to their dietary practice, whether it is being a vegan, vegetarian, or say avoiding pork for spiritual reasons, or avoiding beef for spiritual reasons, we're going to honor that. And I may have to do further investigation so I can design a diet that meets their medical needs and their spiritual needs.
Cindy says, my thought, memory, and recall issues are horrific. Guess it's time to follow up with a neurologist after the white brain plaque. Well, you know, Cindy, you might want to consider including a functional medicine practitioner like Dr. Wahls or myself or my team or others out there that are well trained to identify why is your thought, memory, and recall horrific? Where's the inflammation coming from? You know, for example, the blood tests that I often recommend for people who present like you is called the Neural Zoomer Plus. It looks at 48 different antibodies in your brain. And so what we're going to do is measure, here are the markers of inflammation in your brain. Then we're going to look for what foods you might have that are triggering inflammation. Remember, the most common source of inflammation is what's on the end of your fork, right? So we're going to identify where might that be coming from. Or, as Dr. Wahls has said, it might be a relationship, and it's really going to be of great benefit to reduce inflammation for you if you see a therapist or a counselor. That may be the missing link. But whatever it is, you'll have a game plan to begin addressing it. And then 6 months to a year later, you recheck the tests and you see that 9 of the 12 markers are down to normal. And that means you're on the right track. You're doing great, 75% corrected already. Let's just keep working at this, right? But include a functional medicine practitioner in your evaluation process.
Absolutely. You know, it's strictly the conventional medicine route. They may make a diagnosis and may prescribe the conventional drugs, which may or may not be beneficial. But if they're not helping you address the quality of your diet, whether you have food sensitivities, do you have toxins, heavy metals, or other compounds that are screwing up your brain?
Right.
What's the status of your cortisol, your thyroid hormones, your sex hormones? You're missing a lot of correctable information.
Right.
And
Agreed.
particularly for our brain, in neurology, a lot of the conventional docs are trained on the latest, sometimes incredibly costly drugs that are autoimmune oriented, but they have very little training on how to address the correctable stuff that Tom and I deal with every day. Now, I will certainly acknowledge that in my patients, sometimes we get just tremendous results by addressing all the correctable stuff. And the person has steadily improving function, better quality of life. There will be some times where I do all of my magic. We've corrected everything that we can measure to correct, but they still have such severe damage that's already occurred in their brain, or it's a more aggressive process, that I may consult with my neuroimmunology experts and say, okay, everything's optimized, they're still in trouble. And we jointly develop a intervention plan, which may be very aggressive disease modifying drugs. So it doesn't have to be either or, which we always want to do, correct all the correctable stuff, see what kind of response you have. And I'm open to partnering with my conventional academic neurology and autoimmune specialist to bring in conventional drugs if people are continuing to do poorly. Please don't see this as an either or.
Okay.
Tom and I want everyone to fix their correctable stuff. And then we make a clinical decision separately. Do we also have to use the conventional drugs? Because we have sent people for very potent autoimmune drugs. We've sent people for stem cell transplants even. But I for sure always address all the correctable stuff first.
Agreed. Fully agree. Lisa says, what can I do? I am in a bad rheumatoid arthritis flare at the moment.
Well, the rheumatoid arthritis person are the people who are most likely to have trouble with tomatoes, eggplants, peppers,
The nightshades.
white potatoes. So I want to get the nightshades out. And then you may have to look more thoroughly at the nightshade family. Those are the 4 most popular names. Ashwagandha, for example, also nightshade. And if you're very severe, I would take out all of the seed spices, and I would even take out nuts and seeds. So it depends on the level of discomfort. So I lay all of that out, and some of my rheumatoid arthritis patients are like, hey, that's too hard, I'm not ready. And so we negotiate what they're ready to do. Others will say, like yourself, I have been suffering for so long. I am ready. I'm completely ready. Tell me what to do. And they, in fact, make these very large changes.
Jacqueline says, I just noticed all the poops in Dr. Wahls' background.
Yes. I am very glad that you noticed that.
Yes. So a new paper came out in January by our friend Dr. Alessio Fasano, and the title of the paper is All Disease Begins in the Leaky Gut. And that's the title of his paper, Terry. All disease begins in the gut.
I'll have to look that up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just marvelous. So I'm sure, but please tell us, why do you have little happy poops in the background?
Well, about 1.5 billion years ago, we were all just simple bacteria. And eventually, through evolutionary pressures, some of us got to be more than a single bacteria. We got to be multicellular organisms. And as our ancestors developed a gut, we brought these ancient microbes with us in our gut. And so we are really an ecosystem of me as the person plus trillions of microbes in my gut that will help me digest my food, help me make vitamins, help me break down my food into smaller molecules that will get into my bloodstream, and help me run the chemistry of life. As I get older and wiser, I have more and more respect for how much the health of my microbiome determines the health of me. So we spend a lot of time in my patients and in my family talking about poop and how vital it is. So my family and my friends and my patients know that I love poop. So they often give me poop emojis, poop pillows, poop soap, poop squeezies, poop hats, poop socks. I have all a wide variety of poop paraphernalia. This is only a small partial homage to my collection.
I can just visualize. My brother loves skull, so he's got skull socks and skull belt and skull hats, and so I can just imagine you with poop socks and just laugh.
We have lots of poops, and when I was so I'm old enough. When I was an intern, and our patients were not doing well, and they're so fixated on, doc, if I could just have a good bowel movement, I'd be so much better.
Yeah.
And we residents, we would laugh and laugh at these old folks.
Yeah.
And of course, now I'm admitting that they were so wise, and lament that I had been unable to listen to their wisdom.
Mia says, I went plant-based gradually over 2 years and healed my rheumatoid arthritis. Also did the elimination diet. It's a long process, but so worth it. I feel like a new person, full of energy and no pain at all. Thank you, Mia, for sharing that.
Yeah, there are some plant-based protocols that have also done very well. Rheumatoid arthritis, systemic lupus. And I would certainly want to reinforce, if anyone, myself or Tom, would tell you that we have all the answers. My diet, my approach is the one correct approach to these disease states. That's the time you can quit listening to us, because we get wiser, we get more refined, more nuanced, and there are a variety of approaches that will work. And I'm sure I'll continue to learn, evolve, and refine.
Sandra says, how about healing from mold? SIRS from the mold continues.
Oh, yeah.
2.5 years, although has decreased significantly with changes in diet, exercise, and supplements. Before you answer that, Sandra, I just want to say that you mentioned changes in diet, exercise, and supplements. What about changes in the environment where the mold's coming from? That's an important, you can't live in a house that's got mold and expect not to develop symptoms of mold.
Yeah, our environment has a lot of mold in it. And if we were living outside, we would tolerate that much better. When we live inside in a more narrowed environment, we have much higher spore count, spore exposure. That's part of the problem. Then you have your other environmental factors. Is your NF-kappa B already activated because of your diet? Are your inflammasomes already activated because of your diet and your lifestyle? It depends on how severe your symptoms are. For some folks, just cleaning up their diet and lifestyle is sufficient. For others, they have to get out of that living environment because they can't reduce the spore count. So they cannot be in that home, that living environment. I certainly have had patients who've had to sell their home and go into another living environment.
Yeah.
It can be really helpful to go spend a month away from your home in an environment that you're confident in would be free of mold. And then if you feel like, wow, I'm a new man, I'm a new woman, I feel really superb, excellent, much healthier, more vital, more energetic, and you go back home in your living environment, in the previous living environment, and you have symptoms return, it's very clear that a change with your living environment needs to occur.
Yes, agreed, fully agreed. Lisa says, amalgam fillings, I removed them not long ago and currently using plastic aligners in the now Invisalign. I did wonder if the plastic could be causing the immune response.
Plastics can be a problem too.
Agreed.
Amalgams can be a problem. Finding a dentist who can evaluate and consider this can be challenging. So you'll have to do some investigation to look for a dentist with training in toxicology. But I would be mindful that plastics may also be a problem.
It's all about thresholds. You know, when you cross a threshold, you can't, your body can't handle anymore. But if you reduce your threshold, your inflammatory levels by changing your foods, maybe a little mold in the house won't be a problem. Maybe a little plastic exposure won't be a problem, but it's all about thresholds. And when we cross that line, we cross the line, and you have to reduce that level of exposure that you're getting. Sophia says, thanks to a vegetarian diet, I got rid of rheumatoid arthritis pain, but I still suffer from a swollen knee due to synovial inflammation. Please, what's your advice?
Well, I have this really great book I'd have you pick up. We have a lot of information on there. I'm assuming, I'd probably ask, are you a vegetarian for religious beliefs, spiritual beliefs, or health beliefs? Then we'd do your timeline to understand all of your environmental factors that are contributing. We would look in your mouth, in your joints, and then make some recommendations. I would certainly be concerned that if rheumatoid arthritis was part of the problem, that food sensitivities are still driving issues with your knee,
Right.
and that there's something that's not yet recognized and dealt with.
Kathleen says, I have Hashimoto's and primary immune deficiency disorder and childhood asthma that's aggravated with bronchitis. I've changed my diet, lowered my Hashi antibodies, can't afford functional medicine doctor right now. Any suggestions? Thank you both so much. Love you. And as
really
Dr. Wahls
lovely
picks
book.
up her book, I pick up my book. That's right.
Yeah, you know, pick up these books.
Right.
The resources that Tom and I have created give you a lot more information and empower you to work with your primary care practitioner.
Right.
So if it's a functional medicine doc, yes, that would be superb. They can do additional testing. But again, with the resources Tom has and what I have, we educate you on how you can work with your primary care doc using, you know, basic primary care labs to fine tune the types of interventions that you can try.
And you know, Kathleen, I would say, if you look at the subtitle here, just 1 hour a week to the best memory, productivity, and sleep you've ever had. So that 1 hour of the week is not just for your brain, it's for your joints, it's for any. And what do I mean by this? I mean that it's so overwhelming to change lifestyle. If you just every Tuesday night after dinner or every Sunday after services, whenever it is, but I'm going to devote 1 hour to learn a little bit more from Dr. Wahls' book, from my book, just 1 hour a week. And maybe it's going to be that you realize that the plastic storage containers in your kitchen, they're leaching phthalates, that's the chemicals that mold plastic. They're leaching phthalates into the food that's put in the plastic storage containers overnight. And then the next day you eat the food, and that stuff, it's minor dosing of phthalates, but it's accumulative in your body. And if you've crossed that threshold, that may be a trigger. So 1 week, you're going to go back to the book, and I've got 3 URLs in there for glass storage containers. And you'll go to mileskimball.com, or you'll go to Amazon, or whatever the third one is, and you say, oh, I really like those. And you order 3 round ones and 2 square ones and 1 for the pies, and you pay with your credit card, you hit send. It took you an hour. You're done for the week. And never will you poison your family with minor amounts of poison from phthalates in leftover food. And then next week, it's something else, maybe from Dr. Terry's book. And then the week after that, something else. And every week, if you can't afford a functional medicine doctor right now, you allocate a little bit of time on a consistent basis. And that's how you win the ball game. I will give this example. Some of you have heard this before, and Dr. Wahls knows this one really well. 1986, a microbiologist in Australia named Barry Marshall. He writes a paper and he says, you know, I think that sometimes ulcers are caused by a bacteria. And everyone in the world said, what are you, a nutcase? Everybody knows that ulcers are caused by too much acid and you have to take antacids. Everybody knows that. So what did he do? He did an endoscopy, put a tube down his throat, took a picture of the healthy pink tissue of his stomach, Then he drank a beaker of a bacteria called Heliobacter pylori. He waited a couple of weeks till he was feeling really sick, did another endoscopy, took pictures of his ulcerated stomach. Then he took the antibiotics to kill the bacteria, waited until he felt well again, then did a third endoscopy, take pictures of the healthy pig tissue of his stomach. Then he published it with the pictures. Then everybody knew he was a nutcase. But he proved beyond a doubt that sometimes a bacteria causes ulcers. 21 years later, the guy wins the Nobel Prize in physiology. And the Nobel Committee said, and this was a quote, who with tenacity and a prepared mind challenged prevailing dogma. So you need tenacity. And that's what I mean by 1 hour a week. It's just every week for 1 hour. That's tenacity. And you prepare your mind by reading Dr. Wahls' book, by reading by reading these books from functional medicine practitioners. And then you can challenge the prevailing dogma of how you're living your life or what this food's like or the environment or what's triggering your symptoms. That's how you win the ball game. It's 1 hour a week.
It's very doable. It is very doable.
Yeah. Lisa asked the question, is kefir and fermented vegetables good for rheumatoid?
So fermented vegetables, sauerkraut, fabulously good for rheumatoids. Kefir made with coconut milk or nut milk may be wonderful as well. Kefir made from dairy may cross-react with gluten and may cause worsening symptoms. So I recommend avoiding dairy-based kefir in yogurts, instead using coconut milk or nut milk-based kefirs in yogurts.
Agreed. Ruthie says, I have Hashimoto's. Not a lot of money to go to doctors, though. I have been to 2 functional medicine ones and have listened to you both. Love you both. The best thing I did after going grain-free, starting with specific carbohydrate diet over 5 years ago, was to finally be able to juice greens, dandelion greens almost daily, and I have felt better in every way. Still have trouble with chemical exposures, but I hope it's getting better someday. Thanks for this talk you are doing.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Yeah, it's really great. Thank you.
You know, I talk a lot about trying to maintain access to greens and vegetables now with the COVID, in that grocery shopping is so difficult. So if you're able to stop using any chemicals on your lawn, now here in Iowa, you know, the dandelion greens are coming up. We're putting in our salad greens, and there are a wide variety of edible greens that you can forage for. It's a fun family activity, with the caveat being you have to be sure you know what you are identifying, because there are poisonous plants out there as well. But in Iowa, and I'm sure where you're at in Costa Rica, there are many edible plants that we could be consuming.
Really good point. And I read a paper a number of years ago that says you have to give your lawn 3 years of natural fertilizers if you were using chemicals beforehand, before you would harvest the dandelion. Amandeep says, since spring 2019, I've been working with a CD, not sure what that is, but have seen very minor difference in health. I've changed my diet, no wheat, gluten, egg, dairy, sugar, processed food, legumes, nightshades, and GMO foods. Went through the AIP diet, I think that's autoimmune protocol,
Yep.
but still have chronic fatigue, dry skin, brain fog, hair loss, and skin discoloration. What else can I do?
Well, if you can, find a functional medicine doc who could do a careful history and exam, and probably some additional testing. One of the tests that I found to be very useful is to do a gluten detection in your urine and stool. You may feel like you're being very meticulous with your diet, but if we discover that there's gluten still in your urine and stool, then we have to sit down and figure out, okay, where is it coming from? Is it in a dental appliance? Are the meals that you're getting at your local restaurant that you think are gluten-free, is that the source? Is it that you've not taken the time to read all of your labels? on all of the processed flavorings and condiments and other things that you're cooking with. So that's the first thing I would do, would be to check the gluten in the urine and stool. And then again, I would do a very careful history. I'll talk with you, trying to understand the environmental factors, and I would likely recommend some additional investigations.
Fully agree, especially with the skin discoloration. My first thought, and about the gluten exposure, absolutely. Dr. Wahls, you may be familiar with Peter Green's study that came out last March in gastroenterology. They looked at 5,624 foods from gluten-free menus. And they found that 54% of them, 54% of pizzas, gluten-free pizzas, were not gluten-free. 52% of gluten-free pasta was not gluten-free, and 32% of everything ordered on a gluten-free menu was not gluten-free. So it's critical to check to see if you're getting exposure. I also would strongly encourage you, Amandeep, to be looking at toxic exposures with your skin discoloration and your dry skin and hair loss. Your body's fighting something, and it could be stored from years past. We both have seen patients who are cosmeticians or hairstylists, and they haven't worked in 5 years, but their bodies are loaded with these chemicals. So there easily could be something like that is stored in your body that your system is still reacting to. Okay, let's see, there was one more that I wanted to get to. Let's see if I can bring it back up. I'm sorry, it disappeared. Okay, so we'll let it go. It's been an hour. We try to keep these at an hour. Dr. Wahls, is there a closing summary or thoughts that you need to give?
The most important thing that we can be doing is addressing our diet and health behaviors. So you can have the healthiest diet, the best health behaviors. That will reduce your risk of COVID. It will also improve the quality of your life, your energy, your mood, your mental clarity. So please start with that. You can work with your primary care doc. Use my book, use Dr. Tom's book. These are tremendous resources. And if follow me on Instagram, go to terrywahls.com/diet for a one-page summary that you can go up on your refrigerator to keep you inspired and hopefully very, very successful.
In this current time that we're in with the pandemic, every study I've read that addresses this, they all say the same thing. The only reason that some people have to go to the hospital, the only reason is an immune system that is not able to take care of the exposure. And it's about 20% of the people who are identified that had some symptoms that have to go to the hospital. Their bodies just couldn't handle this thing. And the only reason is a compromised immune system. What compromises your immune system is everything you've heard here today. And Dr. Wahls' book is one of those steps that can just give you the missing link or can be the map on the path. My opinion about books like Dr. Wahls' book and my book is that there's no one book that's going to be right for everybody, but if you order this book on Amazon and you start going through it and you pick up one thing, Terry has seen this slide in my presentation sometimes in the past. I've got a picture and I say, this is from the Museum of Science in Florence. It's Galileo's finger. And Galileo bequeathed that all of his inventions could be on display for all of posterity as long as they also displayed his finger. It happened to be his middle finger. So that gets the audience laughing, right? But it's his finger. It's this one, but it's his finger. And it was his last message to the church. But I put that up there because I developed the principle because I went to, like Dr. Wahls, we've gone to many, many, many seminars in our professional career, last 30 years, 40 years. And if they're good speakers, my pen is flying. Order this paper, try this nutrient. This patient needs to be checked for this. Pages and pages and pages of notes for a weekend symposium. And I go back to my practice on Monday morning, there's no time to implement any of it. You know, just pages and pages of good ideas. And so I came up with the principle. If there's one thing, that's why I use Galileo's finger. If there's just one thing that I remember, that I implement into my practice for the rest of my career, just one. I wish I could do 10, but I can't. If there's one, that weekend was worth it. The time away from my family, the thousands of dollars to go fly somewhere and pay the registration, it was worth it. So if there's one thing that you get from Terry Wahls' book, or if there's one thing that you get from my book, or just one, then it was worth it. If it changes the direction of your life. Order Dr. Wahls' book. One more thing I want to say before we close. I've just done an 8-day series for those of you that didn't know on this current pandemic. It's theDr.com /coffee. And they're all there for you. And every day I talk about, for example, day 2 was to D or not to D. Because there are some doctors who have said, don't take vitamin D. So I talk about the science and what the science shows us. And then vitamin C. And what about sleep? And what about melatonin? So for those of you that want some guidance in this current pandemic, go to theDr.com /coffee. And with that, Dr. Terry Wahls, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to be with you. Bless you. Thank you for all the hard work you do. And I'll look forward to the next time we can be together.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.